We're here with UNISA's Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Prof Baijnath, to discuss open educational resources. Professor, thank you for taking out time from your busy schedule to speak to us.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you very much.
If you can first explain to us, what exactly are open educational resources, otherwise known as OER?
Open educational resources are generally digitized content that's available made available by institutions, by individuals. They're available for usage, generally unfettered. They are available for redevelopment and for improvement. They are available in institutional repositories and open repositories all over the world.
Why is it important for the university?
It's particularly important for UNISA, given our social justice mandate and the character of our institution as an open distance learning institution. We have a commitment to make higher education available and accessible to the marginalized, to the poor, to the geographically remote. And what open educational resources do is take learning opportunities to people who are generally marginalized. And there's quite unequal access to learning materials as well as to repositories of knowledge and to higher education opportunities. By participating in the movement and by contributing to it, we are contributing to accessibility of higher education as well as accessibility to knowledge, which is one of the great inequalities of our time.
Is UNISA doing anything in the area currently, and what's the prognosis for the future?
UNISA is doing quite a lot. For a start, we are in the process at the moment of developing a strategy that will take us forward over the next 5 to 10 years. We have done much work in that. The Office of the Pro Vice Chancellor commissioned 2 studies last year. One of these was to look at the state of the art in open educational resources internationally, and secondly to look at what was happening right across UNISA in the area of open educational resources. And we were pleasantly surprised to see that there are several courses that are already available as open educational resources. We also have a huge digital repository that is maintained by the library with an excess of 55,000 digital materials there. My office is also in the process of exploring with the Hathi Trust, which is associated with Google, to explore our affiliation to the initiative of Google, which has already over 10 million digital resources that are available. It's not without its problems, but that is the route we are likely to go. The Vice Chancellor in February hosted the regional conference that was organized by UNESCO, bringing together all of the African countries to consider open educational resources and the possibilities and the opportunities that it presents, with a view to contributing to the UNESCO conference on OERs that will be taking place in Paris in June. So aside from that, we have some courses that have been made available. We are also participants in the Open Educational Foundation's initiative, the Open Educational Resources University. So there's quite a lot happening at UNISA. So we've made progress even without having a clear strategy on that. The impetus has come from individuals, it's come from colleges, it's come from my office, it's come from the Vice Chancellor's office. So there's an impetus from multiple vantage points. We think that the UNESCO conference in June will give the clearest indication yet of what government policy should be, and we think it will influence our own government's policy, and following that it will give us firmer ground, a firmer direction on where to go as an institution.
UNISA is an open distance learning institution. How is OER related to ODL, and how can it help in the improvement of ODL?
There is no doubt that it can. When you have the wisdom only of one person or one lecturer or one developer of a course, clearly that's a very limited, even if it's very good, it's still a limited perspective. When you can draw upon the wisdom and intellect of multiple people all over the world in a very globalized economy and knowledge society, it makes sense for us to have multiple perspectives, not only the local perspective, but to be informed by a global perspective. And that's what OERs help us do, is to get materials in whatever courses we are offering, is to be able to draw on similar courses in other parts of the world that are available through open educational resources. In that way, we enrich the content that we would find in our courses. We also enrich the method and approaches. We enrich the learning experience of our students, so they have they're able to, the course developer and the lecturer is able to draw on the wisdom of collaborators or developers all over the world. So that, we think, must lead to an improvement in the quality of at least our materials, and most likely also the learning experience of our students.
How can OER enrich our curricula and actually contribute to academic transformation?
Well, we must firstly bring under scrutiny what it is that we produce, because one of the spin-offs from participating in open educational resources is that suddenly whatever one produces as a practitioner within an open distance learning environment, if you have the intention of putting it out into the open educational resource fraternity, is that it's going to come under scrutiny by peers, not only locally but all over the world. And that, I think, places an immense pressure on the developer and on the lecturer. And I think that may be a good thing, because when you know that what you produce is going to come under that kind of scrutiny, it is a quality assurance mechanism on its own, because it makes one far more careful, and I think impels one to put far more thought into what one produces. And I think from another perspective, because we are increasingly shifting all of our courses online, that it also impels us to give considerable thought to how one teaches and how one learns in an open distance learning environment and an increasingly online environment. So we produce materials then that are digital, it's digital content, and we produce teaching and learning materials that are driven by the imperative of going online. So it has a positive impact on the university, whichever way you look at it. And aside from the other points I've made about the enrichment of content from multiple perspectives, the availability of multimedia materials, podcasts, videos, and all of that that can enrich a learning experience, textbooks from elsewhere available through an OER licensing, all of these can enrich the learning experience, enrich the curriculum, and ultimately impacts on teaching and learning.
Do you believe OER could work even before someone gets to a tertiary institution? For example, if he or she wanted to be a doctor or lawyer, could they access course material and then start studying towards their degree or diploma? How would that work practically?
Well, technically it's possible, but whether it's practical or likely, I think is questionable. Because I think if one is at school, one should focus on what one is supposed to learn at school. And teachers certainly can benefit by drawing on materials elsewhere in the world and enriching the learning experience of students. But for a university student, there is clearly nothing wrong with accessing course content from elsewhere, from MIT, from Open University UK, from uh, uh, University of Otago, for example. So that enriches the student's experience. Now, how is it likely to revolutionize learning? For those who can't afford being in higher education full time, and for those who have a desire to learn, they can uh, uh, register for these courses that are available free and in open educational resource format. And once they've been through the learning program, they can get accredited by the institution, and ultimately when they have the full credits required for a qualification, then they can submit for the exam or apply for the qualification, having demonstrated that they've been through the full program. That is what is the intention behind the Open Educational Resource, the OER University. It's still some way to go to work out all of the accreditation implications and qualification implications. So for example, if a student does a few courses at UNISA and a few courses through MIT and another few courses through Open Educational, through Open University UK, it will raise a question of which would be the qualification granting university. So these are things that will have to be worked out in the future. But there's no doubt that it is possible. There's no doubt that it will significantly reduce the cost to students, and it'll make students far more discerning in their choices, because then they can compare between what one university offers and what another university offers, and they can find, for example, if they're doing an economics course, they can compare what UNISA offers with what several other universities all over the world offers, and they can make a choice as far as that is concerned. Furthermore, the lecturers alone can also draw on these resources to enrich their own teaching, enrich their own curriculum. So it will have quite far-reaching implications, I think, and it will make our students far more empowered and make it possible for them to choose beyond what a particular university offers, can enrich their learning in all kinds of ways that the rigid university curriculum actually prevents at the moment.
How does UNISA plan to use OER? What initiatives are currently underway?
Well, we are participants in the Open Educational Resource University, the OERU. That is a major collaboration. UNISA is a founding partner among 10 institutions. It includes major institutions from different parts of the world. It's the leading initiative in looking at how an open educational resource university can work. The African Union has put huge resources into this field, $90 million US. That's a huge amount of money that's been made available. And the logic of it is that public universities in particular are funded by the public purse, that it does not make sense for each and every institution to reinvent the same material, each doing it on their own without collaborating with each other. It's a waste of public resources. So the logic behind it is that whatever is produced, funded by the public purse, should be made available, and that's a good principle. Because we start here locally, that whatever materials we produce should be made available to all the other universities. And likewise, we should be able to draw upon the materials of all other universities for our own teaching and learning. In that way, we're taking the public investment in universities in the development of courseware, which is very expensive, and it becomes more expensive when you're developing online materials and online courses. So the more people that benefit from it, logically, the better for our society and the better for accessibility to learning. So it's not just the exclusive preserve of the very rich and the very privileged. Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges in implementing OER is that of internet penetration in South Africa and the consequence that not everyone has access to a computer or to the web. Is that a possible stumbling block? And if so, how do we close that gap?
We are acutely aware of that. It's a big problem in our country that internet access and cell phone access is among the most expensive in the world. We were hoping that with the increase in national bandwidth capability, broadband in particular, that the prices would come down. We haven't seen the prices come down as much as we'd like to, although they have come down quite significantly. We are convening all of the internet service providers, and the intention is to put pressure on them to provide cost-effective internet access to our students, because that remains a huge barrier to our moving as a university increasingly online. We are hopeful that our students will be able to get internet access at a price of less than 100 Rand for 2 to 3 gigabytes of data. And if we achieve that, then we are in a position to move far more rapidly towards an online learning environment. And we think that that's the future. That's where UNISA needs to go. And it's a huge leap for us to make as a university to move from an analog and print-based technology to the proper digital technology and virtual learning environments. We're also looking at available hardware that makes it possible for students to get cheap access, because at the moment you need to get a laptop or a computer, which can be quite costly. But there are emerging technologies and even available technologies where the device that one uses to access the internet can be kept to under 1,000 Rand, for example. And if we make that leap, as we hope we will do, that combination of cheap hardware with all of the necessary functionalities for teaching and learning and access to the internet would make it possible truly for students to learn wherever they are and to access digital content and to learn through a virtual learning environment and all of the benefits that come from that in networking with other learners, in accessing vast amounts of resources and not only what's limited to the textbook, in improving their learning in whatever area that they want, because there's so much of free content out there that can enrich a student's learning.
Could OER also provide a platform for universities and higher education institutions to collaborate to create new tools and new courses?
Well, the green paper on post-secondary education that the minister published some months ago and was put out a call for commentary on until the end of the month makes this commitment. We believe it's a way to go. For a small economy such as ours, we need to make sure that the resources that we expend extract maximum value. It will make sense for us to bring together our best minds to develop high quality courseware that can be made available to all institutions and anyone who wants to access it, not only in South Africa but also on the continent and even wider. That would ensure that there are proper economies of scale, that we're not duplicating efforts at each and every institution. That's very wasteful. So we see that clearly as a possibility. It's hard to get colleagues to cooperate across institutional boundaries, but we need to change our habits and we need to change our mindsets. and we think that it's doable, and we therefore should support that initiative, and we are hoping that once the green paper gets translated into a white paper, that becomes policy, and that all higher education institutions are bound by that policy, and we will clearly contribute to that and making it a success.
Given the challenges regarding the number of students who enroll at tertiary institutions every year, including UNISA, could OERs possibly provide some sort of breathing space, but at the same time still provide high-quality education?
Well, I don't think that OERs is going to be an alternative to our providing higher education places. The Minister has signaled that we will increase higher education provision from the current 900,000 to about 1.5 million over the next 20 years. We think that's a viable target, it's achievable. We have to ensure that we provide the necessary infrastructure and the necessary resources in order to realize that goal. I think our society needs it, our youth need it, and the economy needs it. So we must see open educational resources as introducing new possibilities for accessing digital content and digital materials. We must see it as a way of disseminating the knowledge that is produced by universities. We must see it as an avenue for us to access knowledge from other parts of the world through open repositories. All of those must enrich the learning experience, and there will be students, of course. We hope it will be a small proportion who will rely on the Open Educational Resource University and other such initiatives to learn. The idea is to provide as many learning opportunities as possible, but it is not intended that we must pass the buck to the open educational resource movement to deal with the challenges of providing higher education access. We still believe that that remains and should remain the number one priority in terms of policy and in terms of infrastructure development in higher education and in expansion of higher education.
How do you foresee the educational landscape changing through the use of OERs at UNISA?
Well, we think, firstly, we will come under much more scrutiny, which means that if you're producing poor quality materials using antiquated methods, it may affect the reputation of the university. So we are worried about that. Secondly, it opens up a whole new world of possibility in collaboration in the development of materials, not only locally, but also with you can have a collaborator or multiple collaborators in different parts of the world working together through available development tools that exist already. In fact, very effective development tools that make it possible for collaboration of this nature. We must take advantage of that. So we can contribute to and lead initiatives in digital courseware development. We can benefit from what's available out there and improve those. So instead of developing something from scratch, you can look at what's available out there and either use those materials if we're under pressure, say in a new area or a new field of teaching and learning. We can collaborate with other institutions locally, and that should be non-negotiable. When we are investing public resources in the development of courseware and materials, we should make sure that the primary benefits go to our society. So it is clearly a different way of thinking, a different way of developing materials and courseware content for an online environment. I think it will change the game quite significantly, but that is what the possibilities in technology are making possible, and we must rise to the occasion.
UNISA's Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Prof Baijnath, thank you for joining us.
It's a great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.